So for today's player profile, we're going to be discussing Draymond Green. Obviously, last season, he had a very up and down season filled with suspensions and, high-level defense, a unexpected jump in three-point shooting. So Draymond is someone that, for the past decade, anchored our defense at a high level, but we've noticed some regression physically and obviously inconsistencies in terms of his availability on the court. So let's get into last season's breakdown. He played 55 games last year, averaging 27.1 minutes per game, 8.6 points on 49.7% from the field, 39.5 from three, 7 rebounds, 6 assists, and 1 steal. Obviously, one of the things that pop off the stat sheet is how well-rounded Draymond is. He averages at least 5, or in this case 6, in each statistical category: 6 assists, 7 rebounds, 8.5 points. So he's a well-rounded player, even at the age of 33, 34. Last season, however, he only averaged 27 minutes per game, which is lower than his traditional, high 20s, low 30s. And he only played 55 games due to suspension and a back injury that he was held out of towards the end of the season. So one of the biggest things with Draymond is every year he's going to give you playmaking within the motion offense. He's going to give you solid rebounding. Now, the shooting is what has really surprised a lot of people because last year he shot 39.5% from three, which was really unexpected. Over the past few years, he's really been floating around that low 30s range, 32, 31, around there. But last year he jumped up all the way to 39, which, again, some people may consider a fluke. Others may believe is, a trend that might be real. He did shoot 50% from the field. And the last few seasons, he's actually been very efficient around the basket. Just from the field, he's been more efficient, attacking the basket, and picking his spots more effectively to score. So that's an area of his game that we've noticed as he's gotten older, he's actually become better at. Now, his greatest strength is being a defensive anchor. Positional versatility, obviously, is the name of the game, and he is switchable. He can play in small ball lineups and guard 1 through 5. Combination of size, strength, and agility. So at his frame, at his size, the fact that he can guard multiple positions, play the 5 in small ball lineups in different combinations, I think that even now makes him one of the best defenders in the league. I know at 34 years old, typically when you're out of your prime or out of your peak years, you decline to the point where you may fall out of that category. But just given his cerebral play and the fact that he's able to, play at a high level in terms of his help defense, closing out on shooters, communicating, directing his, teammates to be in the right spots, rotating on time. And he has exceptional spatial awareness. He understands space, how to, guard in distance and guard in space. He knows when to stunt and recover. So if he's guarding a pick and roll, he knows how to cheat off the ball handler enough, recover to the big, and then contest it if the ball handler decides to take a floater or a shot at the basket. So he plays the cat and mouse game really effectively, better than most players can in the NBA, outside of maybe AD, Bam. Only a few I could name that are in that class in terms of that in particular. So Draymond, I think, right now, obviously we've noticed some physical regression, which we'll get into, but he still can defend at a very high level. And his switchability, his ability to help, defensively cover up for his teammates' mistakes, and close out on shooters, fill in the gaps, hedge, stunt and recover, dig, trap, all of those, schemes, even play as a drop big. He does a really good job all around, and I don't think he has a single weakness on the defensive end. He is still a good rim protector. He plays as a free safety. He roams the court, a negative 2.9 differential percentage when guarding players inside of 6 feet. So he still affects shots at the basket, does a really good job of protecting the rim and deterring players from actually attempting shots at the basket as well. He's good at cutting off driving lanes and recovering, helping on drives, and switching onto players that may be forwards like LeBron or Jason Tatum, being able to stay with them and contest at the basket. So that's one thing Draymond has always been good at, and that hasn't really deteriorated to the point where he's a neutral or a negative. He's still a positive rim protector. Man-to-man defense, his positioning is always sound. He plays fundamental defense, very textbook and disciplined. Doesn't reach in a lot, slides his feet well. He understands distance and how to contest effectively. He has really good anticipation skills, understanding like patterns, tendencies of players, knowing the scouting report and reading their moves, their counters, and cutting those off when they go to them. So Draymond is not just playing defense, but he's thinking defense. He's out there and he understands who he's guarding, what the scheme is, and what he is supposed to do, what his role is in the particular possession. So that is one thing that Draymond excels at in particular is, guarding multiple positions and understanding how to effectively stay in front of his man or bait them into taking the shot and contesting effectively as well. So those are things that Draymond does. He's able to play mind games with certain players as well. For example, with Jason Tatum, who prefers to drive in a lot of situations, sometimes Draymond will gap him to encourage the pull-up three and then contest that shot, making it really tough for Tatum to get it over him. So those are things. Same thing with LeBron, right? Draymond will play up on him and then force the tough mid-range or go under the screen and allow LeBron to settle for a three. So understanding the scouting report, understanding what players do and what they're good at, what they struggle with, how you can exploit their weaknesses and the holes in their games. That's what he does best. And then his post defense, which is probably the most um, critical aspect of his defensive ability. He has low center of gravity. He can push strong players at the 5 off their spots and a 7'1" wingspan to contest shots. So the ability to guard Jokic, Embiid, some of the strongest low post and most skilled players in the league, and able to kind of absorb those bumps, take those shots to the chest, and still stay with them, contest, make it tough. That's something that Draymond's been doing for many years, and he still has, excelled at that. So that low center of gravity allows him to stay in front and to not get pushed off of his spot and be bullied in the low post. He can actually stay in front of his man and make it tough on them. And the 7'1" wingspan is an underrated aspect of his defensive ability because that length makes it very difficult for players like a Jokic to really cleanly get his shots off. Even when he's guarding big forwards as well who play in the post like a KD or LeBron, he can do a good job as well just getting to their peak of the shot and then affecting it and making it tough on them. So another area of his game, and this is more on the offensive end, that he really excels at is being a playmaking hub. The motion offense obviously is the system that we run, and he has the ability to facilitate out of the post. Steve likes to run a lot of his actions and begin a lot of the sets that we, start from within the flow of the offense from the post, whether it's a split action, at the elbow. Draymond is very capable of facilitating and being the trigger man in those situations. He can find cutters and shooters off the ball, understanding where to find them, the angles to run those dribble handoffs or kick out in the corner. He just has the ability to understand spacing and positioning on the court 1 through 5, whether it's at the dunker spot, whether it's on the wing. He has a really good handle of how to play make, and his court vision is really, really a high level compared to most front court players. Most front court players don't have the court vision he does. Directing in traffic, that's a huge thing. He puts teammates in a position to cut or to come off of screens, and he'll tell other players such as Loon or Wiggins even, or Kuminga to slip or to set screens or to cut while other secondary actions are occurring. So Draymond's ability to cause misdirection and understand how to direct traffic, put guys in the right position, he still facilitates really, really at a high level and puts guys in a position to, thrive off the ball because that's really what the bread and butter of the offense is. And, that ability to communicate and to put guys in the right position is critical to the offense that we run. In transition, he pushes the pace, still has really good court vision, finding shooters on the wing or in the corner, being able to, drop off passes to a trailing, Kuminga or Trace, being able to, settle it down and reset at times as well when it's needed. But he has really good court vision overall. He can find players, for a lob threat, kick out to shooters, and cutters, whether it's in the fast break, transition, or in the half court. But overall, his ability to push the pace and put pressure on the defense is something that still hasn't gone away. And we've seen it in spots, less so than in years past, but it's still a part of his game that remains strong. His two-man game with Steph, and not just Steph, but in general with off-ball players like Clay. We've seen it with Jordan Poole, even with Wiggins at times, just understanding where to position each player. His off-ball screening techniques, understanding how to create open lanes and scoring opportunities for teammates, the angles and the positioning to create separation for players to score, like Steph in the pick and roll, or Clay off the ball. And that extra separation is essential when it comes to getting shots off and to being efficient in those opportunities. So Draymond's off-ball screening is something that's really, really critical, and he does a really good job of wreaking havoc and forcing the defense to make decisions because they have to, close out on shooters and get out there on the perimeter to contest. So that's one huge area of the motion offense that he provides value to. And then the dribble handoffs, running keep actions, dribble handoffs, um, misdirection, understanding how to draw the defense in on the perimeter, and then immediately with a burst of speed, drive to the basket. We've seen him do it many times last year, specifically against the Suns when we were playing them at home. He had a few plays where he brought Yusuf Nurkic or KD out on the perimeter and then was able to run a keep action and drive to the basket. Um, and if players rotate, he's just as capable to kick out to shooters and find open threats there. So he understands the cerebral nature of his attack. The DHOs are a huge part of it, and even just freeing up shooters in general, like that's super essential. You want to have guys that understand how to get the ball to the perimeter threat, whether it's Steph or Buddy Hield, in this case, even DeAnthony Melton, Pods. Those are going to be the guards that are looking to score. So Draymond needs to make it a point to get them open and to run those plays, especially improvising when defense cuts off lanes, when the defense, prevents certain openings. You want to have those counters, and that's what Draymond provides. And then as the pick and roll man, he's a play finisher and a connective passer. Defenses still sell out on Steph Curry. They'll still trap and get the ball out of his hands, and Draymond, more times than not, will have an advantage. He'll either connective playmake and find open shooters or the lob threat, or he'll get to the rim and finish at the basket. I've noticed his aggression has increased over the last few years in terms of attacking the rim, so that's something to look forward to next season as well. Just the continuation of him taking shots when they're presented and available. I think he's improved and increased that aggression, which is good. You want to see him, make it a point to attack those open lanes. Now, his vocal leadership, understanding how to read opponents, directing the defense, putting them in position to, rotate on time, and he can read the play before it develops, so he understands how to position everyone in the right spots so they can be in an advantageous situation, and he can then, whether it's closing out on a shooter, switching out with the shot clock winding down, or guarding, at the rim, Draymond knows how to put himself in a position to close a defensive play, so he directs everyone, whether it's going under the screen, over the screen, hedging, trapping, dropping, and then reading, his opponents, understanding how to, calling plays out, right? Calling out sets, putting guys in position to blow those up. I think that's what Draymond does really well. His touch around the basket has actually been improved for the last few years since 2021-22. He's shot around 70% from 0 to 3 feet and about 54.6% from 3 to 10 feet. So he's actually been on the upwards trajectory as a finisher overall. He's gone to the floater a little bit more. He's aggressively attacked when lanes are clear for him. So I think one thing about Draymond is, even though he's gotten older, I think he understands the importance of, filling in the gaps and understanding how to, take advantage of those advantages that Steph creates in the openings. He's also effective in the post against mismatches. We've seen him against guards, like back them down, take a little, baby hook or a push shot. That's a part of his game. That's something that, we don't see very often, but it is there if he has to bring it out. So Draymond definitely can be an effective post player in spots, but he's not someone that's gonna, be very skilled with his footwork or his touch. He's more so gonna just kind of, bump you off your spot a little bit and take a little short, 6 foot, 8 foot shot around there. And then as a rebounder, he's still very good. He's attentive and aggressive in boxing out. He knows how to put himself in a position physically to just get in the mix, get in the fray, and make it tough for even bigger players to position themselves. I think he has a really good understanding of how to, close defensive possessions, and his timing on box outs is also really good. Um, so communication is important, but him just getting in the mix and getting his hands dirty is huge because a lot of players, especially undersized fives, they may be good at, certain things, being switchable, guarding the perimeter, but they may not always be good at boxing out and securing rebounds. And Draymond still, even now, is still a positive in that category. Now, as far as weaknesses go, one of the issues that a lot of people have had over the years is that he's not a scoring threat. He needs to be more of a scoring threat. Even though he's up to his aggression, his efficiency is improving. It's still not quite enough in terms of volume. He also has an inability to create his own shot, poor rim pressure in general. Obviously, as a play finisher, he's capable of finishing plays and converting, advantages. But in terms of on his own making something out of nothing, that's not really what he does best. Defenses sag off of him on the perimeter, and he becomes really predictable at times, telegraphing passes and in transition, throwing errant passes as well, kind of pushing the pace a little bit too much at times, and those outlet passes sometimes get picked off. So the predictability of his game has definitely increased over the years. His passes have become more telegraphed. The reads have become easier for defenses to pinpoint and to identify, which I think is something that I've noticed in particular. And I think, when you look at the fact that defenses sag off of him on the perimeter, they're encouraging him to take those shots, the open ones, whether it's, top of the key on the wing. And Draymond over the years has passed up those shots. He's passed up those opportunities. He's kind of shied away from being aggressive and having that confidence to knock them down. He'd rather at times feed Steph or Clay the ball for a contested look than to take an open look himself. But obviously, I think the last year or so, he's been a little bit more open to taking those shots when they're presented. But that's still something the defense does and leaving him open. And I think he needs to take them when those opportunities and shots are presented because those are quality looks, and you live with whatever happens. Whatever the result is, make or miss, you have to force the defense to respect you, and that is the ultimate. That is the ultimate wrinkle in his offensive game. Is as long as the defense respects Draymond to some degree, then he can take advantage as a playmaker. So while most of his offensive value comes as a playmaker, I still think he's got room to grow as a scorer from an aggression standpoint. And I think last season we saw that growth. I think he's actually improved as he's gotten older in terms of taking those lanes and those opportunities. But like I said, in transition, he sometimes throws errant passes. He pushes the pace too much, and he becomes someone that's a little bit antsy to get the ball up the court, throw outlet passes, and he'll overthrow it sometimes. Sometimes the defense will read that because they know he's a pass-first player. So those are things that I look at personally: is how can he diversify his game and become more well-rounded and more of a threat offensively. So he keeps the defenses on their toes and he becomes less predictable overall. But the rim pressure is another area that I think is something he can work on. Maybe not so much off the bounce, but just, you know, even as a cutter or attacking in an inverted pick and roll, or dribble handoffs. I think those are areas he can really take advantage in as a general player, who's attacking the basket with the ball in his hands. His physical limitations, obviously he's undersized at center, 6'6", 240 pounds or so. Um, Obviously a few years ago, he was much lighter. I think now he's gained a little bit more weight, so that's something we have to look out for. He's taken a lot of physical punishment over the years. Given the fact that he's played the center position for nearly a decade now, banging bodies inside on box outs, taking plays off, um, just the physical toll, the tax that it takes, just guarding in the post, closing out on shooters, rotating on the perimeter, all of that has definitely created regression and caused some deterioration to his athleticism overall. And that right there is partially why we can't afford him to play the five long term. I think the durability aspect of Draymond's, uh, you know, uh, situation as it stands, I think that is one of the more uh, kind of standout issues that we have to address. I think, he lacks explosiveness and quickness off the bounce, so he's a below the rim finisher. And there's times where he unnecessarily overhelps. So he's vulnerable defending quicker guards. If he switched out on the perimeter and he finds himself on a Ja Morant or a shifty player like a Kyrie Irving, he's not someone that can necessarily stay in front of them as well as he used to. Um, that first step quickness is kind of gone, especially at his size and his frame that he used to have in the front court. I think he's lost a bit of that burst and lost a little bit of that lateral quickness, and that's sort of resulted in some defensive regression from that standpoint, especially at the point of attack. So those are some areas that we have to be more mindful of, and that's why it's important to surround him with quality defenders like Melton, like Anderson, Trace, Wiggins, because those guys can make up for that because they're younger, they have better foot speed, and they're just more athletic. They have better endurance and stamina throughout the course of the game, so they can hang in there against switches or against certain mismatches a little bit easier than Draymond can at this stage of his career. But again, he takes plays off. I mean, he can't be locked into every defensive possession. He's more of a role player defensively in some ways than he is an anchor on a possession to possession basis. Overall, I would classify him as an anchor because I still think that's his role. But there are times where he may have to be more of a roamer, or he may have to play off the ball as a wing defender, just guarding the corner man and then helping in a pinch. But Draymond isn't necessarily someone that you can rely on to be possession in, possession out, an anchor of the team, of the defense, because that is an area that requires a lot of energy. It's taxing on the body. It's taken a physical toll on him for the past, 5 to 10 years or so, especially the last 3 seasons as he's gotten older. He's been asked to play the five more. So we need to give him a little bit of a break and buy him some minutes, which I think Trace Looney can do next year in particular. Buying him minutes is absolutely critical. And like I said, being a below the rim finisher, he's not someone that's going to, have a lot of vertical pop off the ground. He's not going to finish above the rim much. So defenses have a better chance and an easier job of really affecting him at the basket. I think, that's why he's needed to be more aggressive overall because he doesn't have a great touch or a great skill set around the rim. So when he's attacking, he needs to attack with force. Otherwise, being a below the rim finisher, in most cases, defenses don't need to respect him as much and they can recover much quicker as well. And ultimately, him being undersized, I think he's said that he can play exclusively at the five and that's something he's willing and capable of doing. But ultimately, there is a breaking point where he's just physically not able to carry forward after a certain threshold of games. So to me, that is probably around 25 to 30. At some point, he will break down, and we've seen the cracks um, in him over the past few years in terms of him not being able to stay in shape or physically hold up his back. The tightness and um, the stress it puts on his body, that is something that's, been an issue since 2022, and he's been out for many, many games because of it. So his durability is in question, and offensively, we're going to need him to be, somewhat more of a positive as his defense regresses, because there needs to be a bit of a compensatory area to his game. If his defense isn't what it used to be, then he needs to improve in other areas. He can't just stay the same offensively. And then one of the biggest weaknesses of his is that he's lost his voice as a leader. Last season, he was suspended for a total of 17 games, which, by the math of it, is around 20% of the season. Um, that's a large bit of time. That's just being suspended. That's not injury. That's not personal. That is just suspension. And we cannot afford for him to be suspended for 20% of the season when the 6 seed and the 10 seed are separated by a handful of games. So Draymond needs to be available and he needs to be out there on the court, helping his teammates, competing. And Steph obviously took a mental toll on him when he got thrown out of the Magic game. So we need him to, that doesn't include ejections, by the way. That's just suspensions. That needs to happen next season. He needs to be on the court. He needs to be there for his team, and he needs to be a good leader. Take the young players under his wing, empower them, put them in a position to succeed, pass down knowledge and advice for them to thrive, and be a leader, be present. Part of just being a leader is just showing up and being there, being present. And if you're not there, then you lose respect from the locker room. And I think that's what's happened over the past couple of years is, you can't really call yourself a leader if you're not there and you're not exemplifying and demonstrating what a leader is supposed to do. So that is an area that he's really lost a lot of credibility in, and specifically, even dating back to the Jordan Poole incident where he punches a teammate. You have to understand, building a competitive environment is good. Building a structure of competition and some juice and some edge going into the season is always a good thing, but knowing where to cross the line is more important because he's crossed the line many times and it's been detrimental to this team. And that is something that, going into next year, he's under contract until 2027, so he's going to be here. We need him to correct that. We need him to be better as a vocal leader and just as a lead by example. Expectations. I expect him to have a consistent role and minutes starting at center. Uh, he will be the trigger man in the motion offense as he has been for years. I expect him to be the point forward. He's always been facilitating the ball, connective passing, pushing the tempo in transition. Draymond, he's someone that we've seen really lean into that playmaking hub that he is, and sometimes to a fault. I think obviously in the pick and roll, defenses more times than not are going to sell out and trap Steph, allowing Draymond to create on 4-on-3s and advantage situations, whether it's for the lob threat, kicking out to shooters. So that's how he'll facilitate. He can't facilitate without Steph or without an advantage creating, or an advantage that's created by a shooter or another breakdown from the defense. He needs some sort of action or some sort of breakdown to occur for him to then facilitate. So he is a little bit reliant on the motion offense, or he's very reliant on the motion offense to be a playmaker. But that ties into his connective passing as well, because he's able to then find shooters in the corner who are open, look for players that need rhythm, and especially in advantage situations, you need guys that can make quick decisions. You can't have players that hold the ball in their hands for too long and get stuck and don't know what to do with it. So one thing about Draymond is he knows how to execute in those situations. And then, like I said, pushing the tempo whenever off of a stop, pulling down a rebound, knowing how to, get on the fast break and be aggressive, put pressure on the defense and score. Score quickly, kicking out to shooters or getting to the basket. That's essential. Screen setting. We know Draymond, as I mentioned earlier, is an amazing screen setter off the ball, setting up off-ball actions for shooters and cutters, whether it's Andrew Wiggins, as a cutter, Steph Curry as a shooter, Buddy Hield off the ball as well. He will be a factor next season. We have plenty of guys that can cut as well, like I said, DeAnthony Melton, Trace, Kuminga. I think Draymond as a screen setter is going to be absolutely essential, as he always has been, running dribble handoffs, pick and roll, post splits, read and reacting. Draymond does that best. He read and reacts. So he understands what angle to set the screen at, how to free up his man, creating separation, when to dive, when to roll, and the playmaking that comes out of that, as I mentioned earlier. So he can slip screens, get to the basket, make plays in the short roll. So those are all essential when it comes to him being the trigger man offensively. He needs to play off of those actions and understand what it takes to be effective in the motion offense. That's what he's done. And more importantly, pass that knowledge down to the younger players like Trace, like Kuminga, because those guys can also pick up on some of the details, the nuance, and the little areas where Draymond can create an advantage in, the tricks of the trade. I think that's something that he can really introduce to Kuminga and Trace in particular. And then his synergy with Steph. Obviously, Steph is someone that plays off the ball for half the game. The other half he's on the ball, but having that two-man game, being able to, set him up, kind of that telepathic chemistry that they have where Steph can relocate, that kind of shifty backdoor burst that Steph has where he'll kind of fake the dribble handoff and then cut backdoor. All of those things and understanding of Steph's tendencies and the pattern of his movements, where he likes the ball, and just those nuances and that chemistry, I think, is really, really important. And Draymond, that's what separates him from everyone else. There are plenty of players in the league that can make connective passes. Obviously, you got Kyle Anderson, another player on our own team that can do it. But the thing that separates Draymond, that makes him special, is that he has that extra layer of chemistry with Steph that elevates both of their games, and makes them more dangerous and more deadly when they're on the court together, especially in closing time, right? In closing lineups, when you have to execute down the stretch, he can find Steph. We saw it in Game 4 against Boston, where Steph was coming up for the dribble handoff, faked back, cut, to the wing, and then relocated, bounce pass to him, and he pulled up for three over Derek White for the dagger. Shots like that in big game situations, like we've seen in the playoffs, like we've seen in the regular season, where Draymond can anticipate Steph's relocation, where Steph's off-ball movement, all of these things are absolutely critical because they take the unpredictability and the improvisation of this offense to a new level. We've seen what Draymond looks like without Steph on the court. He looks a little bit more regular. He looks a little bit more pedestrian. He's not necessarily as effective as a playmaker. Steph Curry elevates him just as much, and I think they can wreak havoc when it comes to execution down the stretch because teams can't anticipate. They can't game plan for what they do because what they do only they really know in terms of relocation and back cuts, the dribble handoffs, the two-man game. That is only that is proprietary That is proprietary to Steph and Draymond. So that will be the case next year as well. Obviously, as a defensive anchor, Draymond is going to set the tone. We expect him to bring the energy, uh, create, give us an edge, right? Create an environment that's competitive and has a good amount of spirit. We don't want to come out flat next year. So setting the tone early, making sure that we come out with the right intentions on a mission to set the tone, winning games and defensively as well, because his impact goes beyond stats. It's not necessarily a situation where he's pulling down, a double double every night, or he's knocking down two or three threes every night. Like for Draymond to make an impact on this team, it's going to be intangible. It's going to be, lighting a fire underneath Andrew Wiggins, making sure Steph is charged up and Kaminga knows where to be. And if guys are making mistakes, calling that out, making sure that the details and accountability is there. Obviously, he has to regain some of that back, given the fact that he's lost a bit of that credibility as a leader over the years. But that should be his role next season: is putting guys in the right position, making sure Wiggins is aggressive, making sure Looney knows where to be, communicating with his teammates, and it's essential that we get off to a good start. So Draymond's presence will be, a factor in that. And then his leadership, right? Like I said earlier, unlocking the best of Kaminga. Obviously, we know Joe Lacob told Draymond, part of contract extension, I want you to take JK under your wing, uplift him, get him to a spot where when you're gone, when you're no longer here on the team, I want JK to carry what you've brought and to continue that, passing the torch. So that's part of Draymond's role, is making sure that you bring the best out of the youth. JK is one of the names that have been brought up, but even Trace, right? Draymond last season really pushed for Trace to play a lot of minutes, playing in his spot even. Obviously, some of that was self-serving because Dre could physically not last out there, and he needed someone to buy him minutes. But at the same time, it did empower Trace. It did give Trace experience and playing time, and it did put him in a position where he could, uplift the youth and make sure that when mistakes occur or breakdowns happen, that they are in a position of uh, to excel, right, and looking out for them and the future in general. And then my player projection for Dre is 28.7 minutes per game, 8.4 points, 7.1 rebounds, 6.5 assists, 1.1 steals, point 8 blocks on 49.7% from the field, 36.3 from three, and 74.8 at the line. I have him playing a touch under 30 minutes. Last season, he only averaged around 27. I have him around 28, 29 next year. I think his minutes won't be around 30 necessarily. They'll be a touch under because he's older now. We have some depth at center with Trace and Loon. They're going to buy him some minutes. Draymond should be more of a closing option. He may start, but he should be more of a closing option at the five, to execute down the stretch. But yeah, he is someone that I expect to play a good amount of time. We're going to need him out there. Last season, he was a massive positive, even in the few games that he played 55, which is a little over half the season. And again, like, the rebounding will be there, the playmaking will be there. None of that I expect to go away. I do think the scoring will take a little bit of a dip. Even though last season he averaged 8.6 points, I have him at around 8.4, and that's because I think he'll be a little bit less efficient. Last season, obviously shot 39% from three. This season, I have him shooting 36. And then from the field, I have him at around the same. From the field, a touch under 50%. Obviously, Draymond has been more efficient over the years from a shooting standpoint. Last season, shot the ball at a 49.7% clip, so I have him around there, give or take, next season as well. And then the steals per game and blocks per game, he's always going to be active, picking up a steal, a block a game, and defensively. So I don't really need to see him average a ton of stocks to know that his defensive presence is there and to feel it, but that is an area that we do appreciate when he's able to wreak havoc and blocking shots, right? Weak side protection at the basket, being able to anticipate passing lanes and breaking up plays. Draymond, is someone that can, find openings and advantages in terms of closeout strips or digging while someone's driving the ball to the basket, picking off a defender. Those are things that he does really well. So he is really a lot on his cerebral ability, his experience, his know-how, and understanding how to execute at a high level. That is mostly what Draymond is operating on right now at this stage of his career. I have him at a plus 212 next season, assuming he plays over 65 games. Obviously, last year he only played 55, and a lot of that was due to suspension, his back injury. So we're going to need him to be available. I have him playing the bare minimum to qualify for all NBA defense, and any award that he may be eligible for. But like I said, being a clear positive is absolutely critical. I think he'll share the most of his minutes with Steph because they want to stagger Kyle and Draymond's minutes, so it only makes sense. But we will see. Draymond's versatility in lineups has reduced over the years just due to the fact that he's regressed. But I still think he can play in different combos. We saw him last year next to Trace. That combination was really good. Um, and we've seen him, next to JK and Wiggs as well. And he unlocked that lineup too in a smaller ball, kind of like a small ball, more kind of quicker, more athletic lineup. So that's really what we have to look at is where is Draymond best suited? But one thing he can provide, like I've always said, the defensive end, he's absolutely critical. Our defense last season fell apart when he was out with suspension in the month of January. We were dead last, 30th in defense. Month after he comes back in February, we were number 1. He has the difference, he has the ability to make that much of a difference defensively from being a awful, one of the worst defensive teams in the league to being one of the best and grading out as a top 5 defense. So that's the impact Draymond Green has. It won't always show up on the stat sheet. Obviously, he has a lot of work to do as a leader and as someone that, should set the tone and doing positive things for this roster because last 2 years, he's been suspended. He hasn't been available. Punching Jordan Poole. He's cost us chemistry. He's cost us games. We need him to be available, and we need him to be locked in. So he will be one of the X factors in terms of getting off to a good start. I do think his shooting aggression and his offensive mindfulness, I think that's increased just given the fact that defenses, they don't respect him. They won't respect him. So he needs to take advantage with what the defense gives him. And last season, we saw him really aggressive shooting the ball more than we have in the past. So I expect that to continue as he gets older because that is how his game will age properly. But when Draymond is out there, he's a clear positive. Steph wants him out on the court with him at all times because they have a better connection than any duo in the league. They've been doing it for over a decade. And Draymond Green, I have him starting next year at the 5. So that is the player profile for Draymond Green. Let me know what your guys' thoughts are